Two beautiful twins are in love with the school nerd. If you dig my recaps, don't forget to subscribe and smash that notification bell. The anime begins with a boy named Shirasaki Jun being called by his mother to meet their new neighbors, two twin sisters his age, the Jinguri twins Rumi and Naori. Jun was a laid-back and highly intelligent boy, and he soon won the hearts of the Jinguri twins. One day, while at their house, Jun saw some ultrasound pictures of the twins that their mother had kept and explained that there are two types of twins, identical who share very similar genes, and fraternal like the Jinguri sisters who are not as alike. However, even though the Jinguri twins were not identical as children, they were almost the same height and had similar haircuts, which made it so that only their mother and Jun could tell them apart, while everyone else, including their own father, constantly confused the two. The Jinguri twins grew up as close friends of Jun and missed him whenever they didn't see him for a while. But Rumi began to notice that Naori had more to talk about with Jun since they shared more common interests like their love for reading, whereas she was more into sports. Unlike Jun, though the rest of the school found Naori a bit strange and didn't like the fact that she always spoke her mind. Though Naori didn't show it, Rumi was convinced that deep down her sister was hurt by the comments their classmates made about her. Even Rumi herself felt bothered by it, even though she only watched from a distance. Tired of hearing the girls at school badmouth her sister, Rumi asked them to stop being so rude to Naori, but they paid no attention and made it clear they didn't care. Then one day the situation escalated and Rumi's friends called her over to see what was happening in the classroom. There she saw Naori arguing with one of the girls who often picked on her, a girl named Firuz, and Jun was in the middle of trying to calm things down. He asked the two to apologize to each other and called Rumi over to join them. Then Jun asked Firuz to apologize to her as well. Firuz complied and Rumi also apologized. After everything had been settled, Jun left the room and Rumi wished he had stayed a bit longer until the awkwardness between the girls had eased. But she realized that wish was unfair since he had already done a lot by de-escalating the situation. This made Rumi think that Jun should stop playing the hero because otherwise she would end up falling for him even more. And with that thought, she finally realized that she had been in love with Jun all along ever since they first met. However, Rumi never confessed her feelings, choosing instead to stay in the comfort of their friendship. And so the Jinguri twins and Jun continued to grow up with nothing changing in their relationship. By the end of middle school, Jun still had more to talk about with Naori, discussing the books they were both reading. Meanwhile, Rumi changed her appearance, becoming more concerned about how she looked and almost stopped talking to Jun altogether despite still harboring feelings for him that she kept secret. Rumi cut her hair much shorter, making it easier to distinguish her from Naori, who kept her look much the same as when they were kids. Rumi also stayed involved in sports and watched as Naori walked home with Jun, wishing she could spend more time with him too. One day Rumi decided to take action and invited Jun to go shopping with her as a way to reconnect. Before leaving the house, she asked her sister if she wanted her to bring anything back from the store, and Naori, who was in the shower, asked for a pudding. After shopping, Rumi and Jun went to the playground where they used to play as kids, and the place filled Rumi with nostalgia. They sat on a bench and started chatting with Rumi, talking about the books her sister was reading. After talking for a while, Rumi finally gathered the courage to ask Jun to be her boyfriend. Jun thought the request seemed out of the blue, and Rumi felt the urge to confess the truth that she had been in love with him all along. But instead, she explained that they were nearing the end of middle school and she wanted to experience dating someone before high school because she knew several girls who were already in relationships. Rumi went on to say that they could date just to see what it was like since they had known each other since childhood, trusted one another, and would feel comfortable starting a relationship. At first, Jun was silent, unsure of what to say, which made Rumi nervous and scared of his answer. He looked at the pudding she had bought for Naori and after some thoughtful consideration asked if she was really serious. When she confirmed, Jun decided to accept her proposal, leaving Rumi wanting to scream with joy, and so the two began dating. When Rumi returned home, she gave Naori the pudding and shared the news with her sister, who was happy for her. But despite the happiness Rumi felt from dating her childhood crush, she couldn't shake a feeling of guilt knowing that Naori was also in love with him. However, as the two spent more time together as a couple, the guilt began to fade, with their relationship turning out to be perfect. To Rumi, they were a great match. She was the sporty girl and he was the smartest guy in school. The two went on many outings together, having fun and looking like a pair of lovebirds, which made Rumi incredibly happy. She could hardly believe she was really dating her crush, but at her request they kept the relationship a secret. When Jun asked why, Rumi simply said that they didn't need to tell anyone and that it was more fun to have a secret relationship. At home, Rumi told Naori that they had kissed in the school hallway and that she had been afraid of getting caught. Rumi then reflected that even though she had asked her boyfriend to keep their relationship a secret, she still talked about him with her sister. But at the same time, she both wanted and didn't want to talk to Naori about it, just as her sister both wanted and didn't want to know. Rumi kept feeling bad for her sister, but deep down she thought the blame for what had happened lay with Naori herself. After all, Naori had been super close to Jun, but never chose to open up to him, wasting precious time. Still, some time later, Rumi began to feel like a terrible sister for what she had done. So she arranged to go shopping with Jun, just like the day she asked him out, but this time the plan was to break up with him. Jun was confused since everything seemed to be going well between them. Rumi apologized for her sudden decision, making it clear that she didn't hate him or anything like that. She also thanked him and said she had a lot of fun during the time they were together, even though deep down she felt like a horrible person. Flashing back to when the Jinguri twins were still children, Firus and the other girls at school used to tease Naori for her reading habits, assuming it was all adult content. Naori shot back at their nasty comments, saying that Firus wasn't that smart and mocked what she didn't understand, acting superior because of it. She went on to say that she understood they wanted to stay children forever, but advised them to think about the consequences of that, which left Firus and the others feeling offended. Naori's fragile ego, along with her deep-seated shame and the books she'd read at such a young age, led to her being excluded at school. Her thirst for knowledge made her feel like Lai Zheng, the tiger poet, a tigress who didn't care about the opinions of others. She had no interest in ordinary people, but Jun had a way of grounding her in reality, teaching her the value of living a down-to-earth life. As middle school was nearing its end, just before the day Rumi started dating Jun, Naori walked into the classroom to show her test results to him and another classmate. She was a bit upset that she hadn't beaten Jun, even though she came close to achieving her goal. Meanwhile, their classmate called her a monster for being so smart. He told her that if she didn't change, she would end up alone because men don't like women who outperform them. Naori found that view outdated and responded by saying she would never fall for someone who wasn't better than her, and she had no interest in any man who couldn't keep up. At that moment, she saw her sister at the door and invited her to join them. Naori knew that Rumi had feelings for Jun too, which is why she never confessed her own love for him. She didn't want to ruin the bond they shared. She thought it was better to leave things as they were because it was more comfortable that way. After joining the group at the table, Rumi suggested Naori check her answers, but her sister refused, saying that would make things too easy. She explained that the fun part was finishing the tests ahead of everyone else and still getting the best score without checking her answers. This left Jun impressed, as he was the top student in the class, yet he studied diligently every day. Naori wanted to achieve the highest score in the hardest way possible because she had made that bet with herself. If she succeeded, she would know that both luck and skill were on her side, which would finally give her the confidence to confess her feelings to Jun. That was why she always felt sad whenever she failed to outperform him on their tests. However, deep down she knew that this bet was just an excuse to delay things, a cowardly way to avoid confessing. This hesitation gave Rumi the chance to act first and start dating Jun. Even though she had feelings for him, Naori reacted to the news of their relationship by expressing happiness for her sister. She even added that the two of them were perfect together, giving her full support, which made Rumi feel relieved and very happy. Yet of course the news devastated Naori. Despite that, she continued to support her sister, asking about their dates and even lending her clothes for the outings. But Naori couldn't help but wonder what the two of them talked about on their dates. After all, Jun was practically a walking encyclopedia, while Rumi was more of a live-in-the-moment type. So on the day Rumi invited Jun out for shopping again, this time to break up with him, Naori asked her sister to bring some pudding back like she she had before. When her sister returned, she shared the news. Naori was surprised by the breakup and asked why she had made that decision. Rumi explained that she still liked him, but felt it was time to end things. Naori then asked how Jun had reacted, and Rumi said he didn't understand at first, so she had to insist on him accepting her choice. Afterward, Rumi lay down on the bed commenting that the relationship had been a lot of fun and that she would hold on to the good memories. She also thanked Naori, who didn't quite understand why. Rumi explained that she was grateful her sister hadn't told anyone about them. After their conversation, Naori headed to her room, thinking about how strange the whole situation was while Jun sat at home flipping through a book. A few days later, when the twin sisters and Jun had already started high school, their families, the Jinguris and Shirasakis, gathered for a barbecue, as they always did at the end of Golden Week. The boys' fathers were chatting about movies, while the mothers sat at another table with Rumi, who guessed the seasoning Jun's mother used for the pickles she had prepared for the occasion. Meanwhile, Jun was deep in conversation with Naori. After a while at the family barbecue, the twins' father asked for Jun's opinion on the movie discussion. The boy shared his thoughts, but both fathers disagreed with him, sparking a new debate about films, which left Naori out of the conversation. Feeling left out, she joined the mothers where her sister was also seated. Jun's mother apologized for her husband's excitement, but Jinguri assured her it was fine as her partner also got animated when talking about things he was passionate about. Rumi added that it was no problem since Jun enjoyed those debates too. However, Naori, unhappy that she could no longer chat with Jun, remarked that she was impressed by how much her sister took after their mother, as they both shared similar opinions on the enthusiasm of men. Rumi didn't quite get what Naori meant by her comment, and the girl returned to sit near Jun, jumping back into the men's conversation. Back in the past, on the day Rumi broke up with Jun, he was initially worried about what he might have done to cause the breakup, but Rumi insisted it wasn't anything he had done or failed to do. Before Jun could fully process the end of their relationship, Rumi made one final request. She asked him to start dating Naori. Naturally, Jun was completely confused. After all, not too long ago Rumi had been his girlfriend, and they were a happy couple. Now, out of the blue, she was breaking up with him and asking him to date her sister. Rumi simply said that she wasn't the right person for him and urged him to consider her request. On the second day of Golden Week, 2 days before the barbecue, Rumi grew impatient with the fact that Jun hadn't yet fulfilled her request, so she decided to visit his house to resolve the matter. Her mother asked her to be home early to help prepare for hosting the Shirasakis, as she couldn't count on Naori's help. Naori was still asleep and only knew how to eat and complain about the food afterward. Rumi's mother also asked her to check with Jun if she could make yakisoba for the barbecue and decide which vegetables would go with the dish. So Rumi headed to the Shirasaki house, where she ran into Jun's parents, who were just leaving. They told her that Jun was still asleep and asked her to wake him up, reminding him that they were going out to enjoy the holiday and that he would have to handle dinner on his own. After they left, Rumi went to Jun's room and found him fast asleep. She watched him for a moment and grew uneasy, imagining how he would react if he woke up and caught her staring at him like that. Even so, she continued watching him sleep, waiting for him to wake up for a long 20 minutes. But when Jun showed no signs of stirring, she lost her patience and opened the window to wake him. Jun woke up confused as to why Rumi was at his house so early. She informed him it was already 1 p.m. and remarked that he looked awful. Jun reminded her that he had just woken up, and she told him to go wash his face. As Jun went about his usual morning routine, Rumi waited, taking advantage of being alone in his room to lie down on his bed, feeling a bit guilty for doing so. Lying there, she regretted breaking up with him, but just then she heard Jun returning to the room. She quickly sat up and told him that his parents had gone out and asked her to wake him. Jun grumbled that his parents shouldn't ask things like that anymore since they weren't kids, then asked what she wanted from him. Rumi explained that her mother wanted to know if she could make yakisoba for the barbecue. He said he didn't care either way and asked if that was the only reason for her visit. Rumi replied that he knew exactly why she was there and asked when he planned to keep his promise to ask Naori out. Jun reminded her that he hadn't promised anything and said her request had been so sudden that all he could do was laugh. Rumi said it wasn't a joke. If it weren't serious, she wouldn't have broken up with him. She then revealed that Naori had always been in love with Jun, which shocked him as he had never suspected a thing. But even with this new information, Jun questioned the point of finding out now after he had already chosen to date Rumi and not her sister. Rumi Rumi explained that this was precisely why she needed to go back to being Naori's older sister. Due to her insistence, Jun said he would try to honor her request, but Rumi replied that trying wasn't enough. Suddenly, Rumi hugged him, and the two almost kissed, but the image of Naori flashed in her mind, causing her to pull back. Once more, she pleaded with Jun to date her sister, saying that despite her own feelings, Naori was still her family. Meanwhile, Naori finally got out of bed and found her father in the living room watching Star Trek. The two talked about the movie, but Naori soon noticed her lunch had been messed with. Furious, she resorted to cooking instant noodles. While waiting for her meal to be ready, Naori received a message from Jun inviting her out. She was thrilled by the invitation, but also found it odd given that Jun had been down since Rumi had broken up with him. Unsure if this was a form of escape, or if he was trying to use her as a substitute, Naori nevertheless agreed to meet him. When she arrived at Jun's house, he suggested they go to the movies. She found it strange since Jun, the nerd that he was, hated crowds and told him she didn't have any money for the outing. Jun reassured her, saying he would cover the costs since it was his idea in the first place. At the mall, the two start talking about movies and get into a debate about which one of them is nerdier considering their tastes in films and books. Suddenly distracted by the conversation, Naori almost trips on the escalator, and Jun wraps up the discussion by saying that she only became such a nerd because of her dad, and if anyone was to blame, it was him. In the movie theater, Naori asks if Jun has spoken to Rumi, as her sister had been leaving the house every day during the holiday. He denies it, and they both assume it's something related to the school sports club, which is exactly where Rumi was. During the movie, Naori finds the story rather ordinary and mediocre, though she notices it appeals to Jun. Later on their way out, they discuss their thoughts on the movie, and Naori asks to go somewhere less crowded because being surrounded by people was exhausting her, so they walk together while Naori keeps calling Jun a nerd both for his intelligence and the way he talks, quoting lines from movies he likes, a habit he had since they were kids. After the walk, they sit on a bench for a drink, and Jun asks if Naori is cold. She finds his kindness odd and immediately says she doesn't have money to lend. Jun explains that he's only concerned because she's wearing a skirt. Naori then responds that girls don't feel cold in their legs even in the winter because they prioritize looking good. She teases Jun by slightly standing up and asking if he finds that charming. Jun becomes completely flustered by Naori's behavior and compares her to a character from Sherlock Holmes, which annoys her even though he thought the comparison was a compliment. Suddenly, Jun turns serious as he remembers Rumi's request. He then asks Naori out, but she apologizes and says her mom told her not to get involved with nerds obsessed with Star Trek or Sherlock Holmes like him. Jun is left utterly speechless by the rejection, but Naori laughs and admits she's joking. She explains that she'd been saving that joke for years in case he ever confessed, and that she'd never turn him down for such a silly reason. Relieved, Jun says she gave him quite a scare. He then adds that he hopes they get along well, to which Naori corrects him, saying she hopes they continue getting along well. Later, Naori arrives home greeting her mother and sister and asks Rumi to stop by her room later. Their mom complains that Naori always leaves juice cartons lying around in the kitchen instead of throwing them away, and wonders what to do with her daughters, one obsessed with sports and the other who won't stop talking about movies. She mentions missing the days when the two wore the same clothes and you could barely tell them apart. Later, Rumi goes to Naori's room as requested, and Naori tells her that Jun asked her out. Her sister is happy and congratulates the couple. Naori asks if Rumi is okay with her dating him, and she confirms it. Then Naori says she didn't expect that reaction, which is why she turned him down, but soon admits she was joking. Rumi gets irritated by the prank, saying they probably wouldn't be friends if they weren't twins. Back to the day of the barbecue. As the day winds down, the men continue talking about movies while Rumi washes the dishes. Jun mentions it's time for them to head home. Naori asks if they can't stay since the next day is still a holiday, but Jun explains that his dad can't afford to be hungover until the very last day. He says goodbye to the twins, asking Rumi to let them know the yakisoba was great, which leaves Naori a bit confused as she doesn't even remember what they ate. Afterwards, their parents comment that Jun could easily join the Jinguri family, which piques Naori's interest, while Jun concludes that they've had too much to drink. He says goodbye again and heads home. Even though their families live quite close to each other, Rumi insists that Naori walk Jun and his father home. Although she sees no need for it, Naori agrees due to her sister's insistence. The next day, Rumi chats with a teammate from the sports club who can't understand why her friend broke up with a guy, even though she still liked him. Meanwhile, in Jun's room, he's on his phone sitting in a chair while Naori lies on his bed. She then asks him to lie down beside her to keep her company. Jun feels tense at the request, but eventually agrees, only to grow nervous again when Naori decides to use his arm as a pillow. She says there's nothing wrong with it, and Jun takes the chance to ask what she's reading. She tells him, and he's surprised by how she manages to vary her reading while he sticks to the same genres, commenting on how hard it was to keep up with her. Naori is surprised by his remark and asks if he tried to follow along with the books and movies she watched, but Jun deflects, not having the courage to admit it. Then Naori asks her boyfriend for a kiss. A few days later, Rumi's friend Riera confronts her about her decision to break up with the guy she likes to give her sister a chance, even going so far as to push the two of them together. She asks what will happen if they fall in love, and Rumi says that as Naori's sister and Jun's friend, she'll feel like she did the right thing. Riera then points out that Rumi can't just ignore her own feelings because she also needs to think about her own happiness. After all, she won't be able to make anyone else happy if she isn't happy herself. Rumi looks at her friend and comments on how cool she is, remembering that everyone thought the same thing back in middle school, and that even Jun once mentioned she would have made a better team captain than Rumi herself. Riera notices that Rumi is talking about Jun again, proving just how much she likes him. So Riera tries to shift the conversation and says that Rumi has already paid for the sin of getting ahead of her sister, and now it's up to Jun to decide what to do. He might break up with Naori and get back with her. Rumi dismisses that idea, saying it won't happen because Jun has always liked her sister. Riera scolds her for having a loser's mentality and asks how she can be so amazing in basketball, yet so clueless when it comes to love. Realizing the conversation is going nowhere, Riera tells Rumi that in her opinion, she's the cutest of the Jinguri sisters, since Naori gives off a manipulative vibe. Rumi responds that she didn't remember Riera disliking her sister. Riera replies that by some twist of fate, she ended up in Naori's class, where Naori is always the center of attention, whether for good or bad, while Rumi was lucky enough to land in Jun's class, and that she should take advantage of that opportunity. Back in the classroom, Jun is talking about movies with his friend Moriwaki, nicknamed Professor, when Naori joins in, commenting that Gamera is unique because of the romance. Moriwaki disagrees, saying he didn't see any romance in the movie. But Jun explains that he read an article where the director hinted it really was a love story. Naori gets excited about the conversation, and Moriwaki suggests that the three of them have a movie marathon of the trilogy together. Jun declines, saying it's not possible during the week, but Naori and Moriwaki continue to insist on the idea, planning to watch sometime over the weekend. Just then, Rumi shows up and scolds her sister for not being in her own class since lunchtime was almost over. Naori leaves, and Rumi turns to Jun, asking if they were having another nerdy conversation. Moriwaki feels insulted and explains that they were offering a critique of the movies, but Rumi dismisses the distinction and tells him to get out of her seat as he was sitting at her desk. Jun agrees that the professor should go back to his own seat, and Moriwaki leaves. Rumi sits down and comments on how strange Moriwaki's nickname is, remembering it had something to do with Sherlock Holmes. Jun agrees and explains that it comes from Professor Moriarty, Sherlock's nemesis, and that Moriwaki is pretty much like Moriarty. However, Jun clarifies that it wasn't him who came up with the nickname, it was Naori. Rumi remarks that her sister loves giving people strange nicknames, mentioning that she even gave one to her friend Riera. Jun observes that Naori is very much like their father, sharing a love for anime, manga, and movies, while Rumi seems to take after their mother more. In Naori's class, test scores are handed back, and a friend named Kamdake asks her how she did in English. Kamdake feels disheartened to learn that once again she didn't outperform Naori, who had nicknamed her Chief. Naori tries suggesting other nicknames, but Kamdake rejects them all. Then Naori asks which subject she feels most confident in, and Kamdake replies that it's math, prompting the two to agree on making their next duel in that subject. Kamdake thinks about what prize to suggest and offers up sweets, but Naori declines, saying she gained 3 kilos during Golden Week. Kamdake tells her she doesn't doesn't need to go as hard as her sister, but that maybe she could start doing some physical activity. This suggestion irritates Naori. Finally, Kamedake proposes that the loser treat the winner to unlimited karaoke so they could burn off some calories. Naori agrees to the prize, and the two get ready to see which of them scored higher in math. In the next scene, Jun gets a text from his girlfriend saying she's going to karaoke. Seizing the opportunity, he asks to hang out at Moriwaki's house. While in Moriwaki's room, Jun notices that his friend has a DVD of adult content featuring an actress who looks like Naori. He finds another DVD and realizes Moriwaki has a whole collection of them. Jun then asks if his friend likes Naori. Moriwaki confesses that he has a crush on her and even confessed his feelings at the end of middle school. Jun is shocked as he had no idea and asks what Moriwaki liked about her. Moriwaki responds that it's her face and her bust, calling her the most well-developed loli he's ever asked out, and adds that she liked the same things he did. At this point, Moriwaki remembers he's talking about the girl his friend likes and says that his crush is in the past. Jun, recalling Moriwaki's bad reputation at school for having adult DVDs, warns that Naori will get mad if she finds out he sees her that way. Moriwaki insists she wouldn't, and Jun admits there's a chance she might actually just get excited and start asking a million questions. Moriwaki explains that he discovered his collection before asking Naori out, but bought the rest of the DVDs during Golden Week thinking of her, though he did it out of friendship to avoid coming between Naori and Jun. Jun finds this reasoning a bit crazy. Moriwaki clarifies that he hasn't tried anything with Naori since realizing she likes Jun, who is once again surprised to learn that his friend had noticed Naori's feelings for him. Moriwaki is shocked that Jun hadn't picked up on something so obvious and says he was even surprised when Jun asked her out and she accepted. Moriwaki envies his friend for having two beautiful twin girls interested in him, but since the guy seems confused, he says the solution is simple. After all, he's always liked Naori. Jun explains that he did like her, but everything changed when he started dating Rumi, for whom he still has feelings. So his friend starts coming up with nicknames for Jun and tells him to sort things out instead of asking for advice from others. Meanwhile, Naori is enjoying karaoke with her friend, while Rumi is practicing basketball, during which she falls and gets injured. That evening, Jun goes over to the Jinguri twins' house and delivers some butter his mom sent as a gift to their mother as a thank you for always letting him have dinner there when his mom is busy working. The twins' mother reassures him it's no trouble and mentions that her husband is always happy when Jun visits. At that moment, Naori informs her parents that Rumi won't be coming down for dinner. Jun finds it odd and asks what happened. The twins' father explains that Rumi sprained her wrist during practice and hasn't left her room since she got back upset because now she won't be able to become a starter in her first year as she'd hoped. Naori jokingly asks if anyone wants to dance outside her sister's door to cheer her up, and Jun offers to try talking to her. He goes up to the room where Rumi is feeling miserable. She lets him in and says that nothing ever goes right and now it would be impossible to become a starter. Jun reminds her that she's always taken basketball seriously and given it her best, and even though he doesn't really understand sports or know what to say in a situation like this, it's okay to cry. At that, Rumi, who had been holding back her tears, breaks down and sobs in his arms, lamenting that she got hurt when she was so close to achieving her goal. Jun comforts her, recalling how she's never liked crying in front of others since they were kids, never complaining and always pushing herself to the limit. The two lock eyes, and just as it seems like a kiss might happen, Naori shows up at the door, asking if her sister has calmed down. Rumi, startled, apologizes for worrying everyone. Naori simply says their parents are waiting for her. Jun also apologizes for making her worry, to which Naori replies it's fine, adding that she's glad her sister is feeling better. She then asks if he danced for her, but Jun, not amused by the joke, says he just comforted her a little. They head downstairs for dinner, and everyone chats normally, with no one mentioning Rumi's red eyes. Likewise, Naori doesn't comment on how her sister avoids looking at Jun, just as Jun avoids looking at her. The next day, Naori goes to Jun's house so they can walk to school together as usual. On the way, she remarks that he left home earlier than usual, just like she did. Jun then asks how Rumi is doing, and Naori replies that her sister is still training despite being injured. Taking the opportunity, she asks if he plans to join any school clubs, but he stays silent as she rambles on. After a while, she apologizes, realizing she was going off track. Naori then asks if something happened, noticing wrong, he doesn't seem enthusiastic. He denies it, saying it's her who seems different. She apologizes again and walks the rest of the way to school alone. Later, Naori goes to Jun's classroom door trying to peek inside when Moriwaki appears, telling her he's not there. She complains about the scare and walks into the room where the guy says he has no idea where Jun is. Moriwaki also mentions that his friend told him about them, and Naori realizes that Jun had done so to ask for advice. Moriwaki is surprised she figured that out and compliments Naori, calling her amazing, and the girl of his dreams lamenting not having asked her out more seriously. Naori responds that it was serious enough and she knew well how he felt. Moriwaki then gets curious and asks what Jun and Naori were like as kids. Naori finds the question vague and says they used to talk about books and movies, but Jun got along better with her sister. Oddly enough, Rumi thought the opposite. Moriwaki notices Naori seems a bit lost and asks if she knows who Jun's first love was. Without hesitation, she answers that it was her sister, but Moriwaki clarifies that it was actually her. Meanwhile, in the school hallway, Jun is talking with Rumi, who says this should be the last time they meet alone. He admits he hasn't been able to forget her, and Rumi sighs, pointing out that Jun has always liked Naori, and now that he knows the feeling is mutual, the two of them should be together. Jun confirms that Rumi had started dating him with the intention of breaking up from the beginning. She doesn't deny it, apologizing and explaining that she just wants him and her sister to be happy together. Tired of her playing matchmaker, Jun tells her that while he did like Naori, that's in the past since they started dating. Rumi is the one he's been in love with. Rumi is taken aback and complains that he only confessed now, noting that he never once told her he loved her while they were dating. Jun regrets not telling her sooner, explaining that he thought she understood. Rumi, frustrated, asks how she was supposed to know if he never said anything. Back in the classroom, Moriwaki freaks out upon realizing that Naori had been crying, but she pulls herself together and says she'll sort things out on her own. At the same time, in the hallway, Rumi starts to tell Jun that she's been hiding something from him too. Afterward, Rumi asks Jun when he got over her sister. He explains that at the beginning of elementary school, he wanted Naori to see him as her equal, and he tried to outdo her in tests, readings, and any knowledge-related activity. But when he realized that he was the only one seeing the two of them as rivals, the magic simply faded. Jun tells Rumi that it was around that time he started dating her, and after that he stopped focusing on Naori, viewing her only as a hobby friend. This is when Rumi realizes that while her sister hesitated, she overtook her and stole her love. Back then, she thought she'd be happy if Jun chose her, but she realized that he couldn't ease the guilt she felt for having gotten ahead of her sister. Rumi then tells him that he'll forget about her with time now that he's dating Naori, but Jun responds that she's asking too much. She stands up, happy that Jun looked at her, even if just for a brief moment, and notices crepuscular rays in the sky. He's surprised that Rumi knows what they are, and she explains that he was the one who taught her. Then Jun wonders aloud if things would have been different if they had talked like this before. She replies, maybe, and begins to leave, saying it's time for her club. Before Rumi walks away, he tells her that he thinks she's strong. She feels annoyed that he couldn't see she was just pretending to be okay. Then he adds, though it's a bit late to say, that he really enjoyed their time together when they were dating. Later, Jun goes back to his classroom where he finds Naori's friend Moriwaki waiting for him. Jun asks what he missed, and Naori jokes that the professor said some inappropriate things to her, making her cry. Moriwaki protests that this isn't what happened, and Jun believes his friend, asking for the real reason Naori cried. She makes up an excuse about her eyelashes falling into her eyes, and Moriwaki asks where Jun had been. He explains that he had business in another class and apologizes for keeping them waiting. Naori complains that she had to wait too, and leaves the room, randomly handing some trash to Moriwaki as she goes. On their way home, Jun and Naori chat about a story, and she invites him out later in the month to make up for her earlier teasing. He agrees, but notes that the end of the month is a while away, and she responds that she has her reasons. Later, Naori tells Kamedake about the upcoming date, and her friend remarks with a hint of criticism that she's sometimes surprised by Naori's confidence. Naori brushes off the comment, staying positive about the date. Kamedake then suggests that her confidence comes from her self-esteem, since she's pretty sharp and smart. Naori reacts so naturally to the compliments that Kamedake feels like taking them back, complaining about how boys always fall for her. Kamedake then asks what her plan is for the date with Jun. Naori replies that she hasn't even decided what to wear yet. Her friend advises advises that it's important to plan everything since this is a great chance to leave a different impression, and she recommends Naori wear a white dress. Naori dismisses the idea, saying she needs something that accentuates her waist. Kamdake jokingly suggests that this means she's gained weight, but Naori cuts her off before she can finish, causing Kamdake to change the subject, saying that it doesn't really matter what she wears on the outside, but what's underneath. That evening, Rumi finds her sister watching a romantic comedy, something quite rare for her. Naori comments on how girls sometimes fake enjoyment with their boyfriends, likely triggered by a scene in the movie, and she adds that although it's a lie, it's for a good cause to make their partner happy. Rumi pretends not to understand what Naori means when she tells her that she has a date with Jun. Rumi grows worried because of Naori's earlier comment and tells her sister to keep her head on straight, but Naori responds that Rumi misunderstood and even offers for her to join them if she's that concerned. Obviously, Rumi declines and asks where they're going. Naori reveals her plan to take Jun to Kasai Marine Park, thinking it will please his nerdy side and make for a good date spot. Later, Jun is reading a book when he receives a message from Naori telling him that their date is the next day bright and early and reminding him not to be late. The next day, the two meet and Jun is surprised at how pretty she looks. At the park, Naori mentions wanting to go on the Ferris wheel at sunset and playfully scolds him for not suggesting it first. As they continue their date, Naori remembers the last time they went on the Ferris wheel with Rumi. She teases him about being afraid that the screws would come loose, while she was thinking that a little danger from up high would be thrilling. The two continue to enjoy the park, taking photos and exploring different areas until they reach the aquarium. Naori becomes excited while looking at the fish, while Jun gets distracted by memories of his time there with Rumi when they were dating. Naori notices that she's been admiring the aquarium alone and reminds him that they're on a date, so they should be enjoying it together. He makes up an excuse, saying she was so focused like a child that he didn't want to interrupt. This only causes Naori to complain again, saying that if it's going to be like that, she'd rather spend time with sea monsters than with him. Afterward, as they're walking, Naori starts babbling, prompting Jun to comment that she's starting to sound like Moriwaki. Suddenly, she gets excited when they find a touch tank exhibit. Naori eagerly enters the area and finds a shark on display. Curious about what its skin feels like, she touches it, and Jun warns her that her hand will end up smelling bad. Naori smells her fingers, which had brushed against the shark, and is startled by the stench, remembering that dead sharks release an ammonia odor. Naori asks Jun to smell it too, but he refuses. She insists, saying he'll die without knowing what it smells like, and due to her persistence, he eventually gives in. But the moment he smells her hand, he nearly falls backward and gets back at her by pinching her nose. Meanwhile, Rumi is watching the basketball game from the stands next to Riera, who, looking a bit upset, mentions that she thought they would at least make it to the semifinals, but remembers they still have the matches for 5th place. Back on the date, the couple continues exploring the park until Naori mentions her legs are shot from all the walking and suggests they take a break. Suddenly, a gust of wind blows, lifting her skirt. Embarrassed, she crouches down and asks if Jun saw anything. The guy turns red and says he was attacked by a bunch of bear skin. He asks if Naori isn't wearing anything under her skirt, which only makes her angry. She asks what on earth he's thinking and assures him she is wearing clothes, specifically an outfit recommended by Kamdake. He gets embarrassed again while she pretends to be mad, though deep down she's actually pleased. Later, they return to talking about movies, and in the middle of the conversation, Jun notices Naori. As it was getting late, he stands up and says it's time to ride the Ferris wheel. He takes advantage of the moment and compliments her nail polish, saying the color is beautiful despite the smell. Naori feels offended and says it's rude to tell a girl she smells bad. Back to Rumi, Riera comments that she's looked lost all day and asks if something happened. Rumi replies that nothing happened, but that she's gotten over a few things. Riera then asks if that means she's moved on from Jun and won't try to steal him back. Rumi assures her she won't, and her friend tells her there's no reward in holding back. She adds that happy people are really different. But Riera says she's not as happy as she'd like to be, explaining that every time she's with her boyfriend, it seems like all he can think about is that, and they ended up arguing about it a few weeks ago. Rumi feels bad for her friend and asks why she hadn't mentioned it earlier, knowing it must have been a tough time for her. Riera responds that she chose not to bring it up since Rumi was going through her own struggles. Rumi then asks if it's true that guys only think about one thing after they do it for the first time, and Riera says that's how it's been with her boyfriend. Riera notices that Rumi is worried about Jun getting to that point, but Rumi cuts her off mid-sentence, signaling that she doesn't want to talk about it. Riera gets the hint and changes the subject, suggesting it's time to head home since it was getting dark. Rumi replies with, "It's the twilight hour," and Riera says she sounds just like Jun. Rumi explains that he taught her that it's the time of day when you're most likely to encounter something bad. Rumi remembers when she went on the Ferris wheel with Jun at sunset, and he told her the same thing, which prompted them to head home. But unlike her sister, Naori enjoys the Ferris wheel ride with Jun, captivated by the view. She takes the moment to confess that she's always been in love with him, and that her goal of finishing exams early and getting the highest score was a challenge she set for herself. Jun watches as she recalls the few times he actually scored higher than her. Naori says that when she saw how much it meant to him, she realized how much she meant to him and understood that he had feelings for her. However, Naori regrets being childish and cowardly, admitting she was too scared to express her feelings, which is why she came up with a challenge to complicate things where she would only confess if she beat him in grades without checking the answers. She says sadly that she was foolish, but Jun responds that she wasn't as foolish as he was. She smiles and says she hopes that's true. After the date, Jun wonders when he should talk to Naori and invites her over to watch a movie at his place. She replies asking if this is another date, but he denies it, saying it's just a movie he wants to show her. Later, after watching the movie, Naori is buzzing with excitement, saying she should have seen it earlier because both the music and the story were out of this world. They start chatting about movies while Naori holds the stuffed fish she bought at the park. Afterward, they head to Jun's room where he picks out a book for them to read and hands one to Naori. But instead of taking the book, she pulls him onto the bed, completely confusing him with her actions. Jun tries to get up, but she climbs on top of him. He asks her what she's doing. Naori kisses him and asks if she really needs to explain. Jun gives in to the moment and returns the kiss, but suddenly Rumi pops into his mind. Noticing Jun's hesitation, Naori reassures him that it's okay to do whatever he wants, but he responds that even though they're dating, he just can't. Naori apologizes and says that at least from her side, they're not really dating. If you're enjoying this journey, don't forget to hit that like button. Your support helps motivate me to keep bringing you each episode. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. See you in the next episode.